thank you for joining us tonight on Publishing for Writers. It just is some quick house rules. If you can silence or turn off your phones or devices, that would be helpful. Let's see, we have emergency exits at these two sides over here. There's another door there in case of anything. Restroom is over here behind us or around by reference if you need to use it. Tejas is also going to be recording, but only in the front over here. He's not recording the audience. So in case you're wondering why that phone is there, that's why, for his own purposes. I do, of course, want to announce our guests in our roundtable tonight. Tejas Desai is the author and is the artist collective The New Way, and he has written the Brotherhood Chronicle series and Bad Americans. And we also have Michael Freeman, licensing manager of Paramount, and he also has past experience working at DK Publishing and Disney. So we look forward to a great evening of different perspectives in both publishing and self-publishing. So since this is a roundtable format, I'm going to ask some questions as moderator, and they will answer them briefly. We'll also have time for some Q&A at the end as well. And just to keep the format proper, if we could just hold questions till the end, that would be great. All right, so let's get started. Okay, what advice would you give a writer just starting out?
I guess I'll take that as a writer. So yeah, I mean, that would depend on what kind of book you want to write, etc., etc. And how serious you are about entering a body of work, just want to write one book. Personally, my personal habit is that I write 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. Get up at 6 in the morning, do it for a couple of hours before I go to work. So I do think that, just like any other art form or any other behavior, it's learned. And if you do it consistently, it's something that definitely helps. And obviously reading is also important, seeing what's out there. I mean, that there are a lot of answers to the question. It's kind of a large question, but yeah, that's a general advice I would give.
Okay, what advice would you give, Michael, for writers starting out?
I would say just start writing. Put the pixels on the screen, or put ink on the paper. And when you're ready to show it to somebody, get feedback, and hone what you're doing.
Okay, thank you. All right, so for our next question, what's your general writing habit, and how is it possible to write a readable novel? We can start with Tejas.
So yeah, as I said, I do write regularly, about 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. Making something readable, at least, there are different people write different ways. And I know somebody, for example, who wrote a page a day, and by the end of the year, he would have a novel, right? 365 days, 360 pages. I kind of go, I guess, a more inefficient way, which is that I usually write very huge drafts, and then I rewrite them, until they're tighter and tighter, until they become, compelling, readable novels and short stories. So that's the way I do it. I think probably more people do it that way than not, but everyone kind of eventually gets there the way their writing technique, but that's the way I do it.
Okay. Michael, I'm not sure if you're a writer, but if you do write, what is your habit, and how is it possible to write a readable novel?
So I am not a writer. I work for publishers. So in chatting with editors from the different publishing houses throughout my career, what I generally hear is pretty much the same, is that they're writing every day, and it depends on who the author is. They'll write a whole big block of text and then eventually go back and edit. But I've heard people saying I sometimes treat it like a marathon. I gotta write until I'm gonna sit at my desk and write until I need to go to the bathroom. I've heard that technique, and that way the words just fly out because you're under pressure, literally. And then when you need to go, that's when they stop. So, yeah, I've heard all different techniques from all different authors.
Thank you. I guess this applies for those that do have it. Do you feel it's worth it to get an MFA in creative writing? If you do have an MFA in that, what did you learn from it? We can start with Tejas.
Yes, so I do have an MFA in creative writing. I got mine at Queens College, graduated 2009, so that's a pretty long time ago. But I definitely thought it was helpful, just in the sense that, at that point, I didn't have lots of people critiquing my work at one time. And that was really helpful in the sense that, in the moment you feel kind of attacked. You're giving your writing to a bunch of people who are also writers, and they're basically tearing it apart, I guess. They're critiquing it pretty vociferously. So in the moment you feel kind of attacked or whatever. But I definitely learned what my weaknesses were as I was writing. This was kind of early on. I was in my mid-20s. And even though I've been writing since I was 8 years old, and I had completed novels and stuff which weren't published, I think I did definitely become a better writer that way, in the sense that I got that feedback and learned how to take it and make my writing better. I made a lot of my weaknesses my strengths in that way, and I learned what they were. And it's kind of similar to the same process I use now. Like, for example, Bad Americans is a very ambitious project. It's a novel and short story collection in one, which is published in 2 parts because of its length. It's almost 1,000 pages long. So, but it's a realistic depiction of the pandemic, and it's about 12 characters who are quarantining at a mansion in the Hamptons in 2020, right after the New York City lockdown. And each character has a different race, ethnicity, sexuality, profession especially, and each character every night tells a story. It's really 12 stories of varying lengths, techniques, styles, subjects. And so when I was writing it, I wanted to get it out to people who knew about these different worlds that were depicting, whether it was modeling, whether it was the world of law, or whatever it might be. And that way, and I was able to get it to people who knew about the subjects, and then take that criticism and that feedback for that. And then I was also able to get it to beta readers who were able to criticize it as a work of literature. And so I got both. And so even with that, within a couple of drafts, 2-3 drafts, I was able to complete the final version, at least of the stories themselves. Frame narrative a little bit more difficult, but to give you an example of what I learned in the MFA that I eventually, now use kind of commonly in my writing practice.
Yeah, and I would say meeting many authors throughout my career, some of them were MFAs, majority were not. Almost all the up-and-coming authors who have had New York Times bestsellers, they still had day jobs. Some of them were history teachers, some of them were librarians, some of them were lawyers. And I think it's just about having the storytelling bug in you is really what, on the publishing side, that we're looking for. Can you tell a good story that's captivating?
And the other thing I would say also is the MFA in creative writing, it makes it easier to get a teaching job, which is how a lot of writers make their living. It's not myself, I'm a librarian, public librarian, but that's my day job, but a lot of writers do teach. And granted, to get one of those top positions, you really do need to publish a book that's usually published by a major publisher and acclaimed and all that stuff. But in terms of just teaching itself, it does make it a little easier if you have an MFA and you're within that ecosystem, I guess.
Okay, thank you. For this next question, I'm just going to jump a little out of order because I think it might be more in Michael's field. The next question we have is, at what point should you write to a literary agent? So I'm wondering from your perspective, as someone who has looked at other books, what do you look for when someone writes? So what kind of things should they put in their query letter?
So as soon as you know that you want to be a writer and you do want to be, you feel like you want to be published, you should start right away looking for a literary agent. And it's actually simple to find one. All you have to do is type in who is Stephen King's literary agent, and Google will tell you, because all of the literary agencies love touting their clients. So whatever genre that you're going to write in, pick your favorite author who you are most like, type in their name, and just ask Google or your search engine of choice, who is their literary agent, and you'll see the firm that they're working with, and then you also get a couple of other hits, and you'll see who is like that literary agent. So, but I would say it's really when you get the inclination when you want to do it. Do you need a full manuscript? I don't know, is that one of the questions, or?
I don't think so.
No, so you actually do not need a full manuscript to. All you need is a brief pitch idea, and again, if it's something that literary agency finds attractive, they will say yes. They will know, or they may give you recommendations on how to improve. I've seen people submit, and this is as a publisher where we've decided to publish a book on 3 chapters, because those 3 chapters were, and throughout the process we would go, so how is it going? And they're like, well, they're not done with the book yet. So we would be on pins and needles. We were like, well, the pub date is coming up. Do we have a manuscript yet? Do we have a story? No, they're still working on it. The editor would be massaging the manuscript as it's coming in. Sometimes it would be co-written, but to go back to the literary agent question, it's like when you feel like you have the right idea, when it feels like you wanna put yourself out there and be ready for rejection, because it's gonna happen. I know authors who have gone through that, they have like the wall of rejection letters from agents, and they have another section of rejection letters from publishers that their agents have put forth. So I think Brad Meltzer has this famously on one of his walls in his house. Yeah.
Well, can I answer that question?
Yeah, you can answer too.
So I come at it from a different perspective as a writer, of course. So yeah, it's not difficult to find agents. It's not very easy to get one. The best way to find one, actually, if you go about it, is there are a few websites. One is Manuscript Wishlist. That's probably the most popular one right now. It's also Query Tracker. Agent in a Box. Agent Query is a little bit outdated. But anyway, those will give you a lot of information about getting agents. It's true for a nonfiction book, you don't need the whole manuscript. You could just submit a proposal. That will also depend on your marketability in terms of how big you are, in terms of how big you are in terms of people know you. Hillary Clinton is just going to get a book published, and there's going to have a difficulty about that. But if you're just Joe Schmo, I'm not so sure about that. I'm contradicting a little bit. In terms of fiction, they almost always tell you to have the complete manuscript ready and done, and send it before you send your query. If you look at these websites, they all say that. So I'm not saying that you cannot have a manuscript ready and still get an agent. It's been done. It will be done again. But in general, that's what for fiction people expect. For agents, they obviously deal with major publishers. So you definitely need to have it at a particular length, usually about 75,000, 85,000 to 100,000 words, 85,000 being the ideal. Fit it into a particular genre, whether it's science fiction, mystery, thriller. They need to know they're going to put it in a bookstore. So Yeah, I mean, again, you go to Nathan Bradford, whatever, there are a million websites you can go to that will tell you that. My books are also published, all 6 of them, through my own company, and now I've created my own author collective as well. It's a different path. This one where you have more control, but you also, there's still discrimination, there's still the stigma to some extent. It's a path that most writers say, I think like 80-90% of books right now are self-published. But it's also one that will put you in that kind of group. So, I decided to self-publish my work in 2012, and I've pretty much never gone back. I can talk a little bit more about that process too, if you'd like. But those are the 2 major differences. Literary agents obviously deal with the major publishers, companies like his. But they also, it's pretty conventional. I mean, you can have it a certain way. And I didn't want to have it a certain way, so that's the difference between me.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, so I guess that's a good segue into the next question, is that does a book have to be a certain way to be traditionally published? I guess start with Michael.
Yeah, again, it depends on the type of story that you're telling. I've seen it so many different ways come into us in the various publishers. So a little bit about my publishing history is that I started out working at DC Comics. So those are graphic novels. So I've seen that genre. I then went to Abrams, which is Diary of a Wimpy Kid, but they're also doing these deluxe art books as well as self-help books, but also doing narrative fiction for young adults as well. So through Abrams, I've seen most everything come through. Then went to Dorling Kindersley, DK, which specializes in nonfiction visual. However, they did start a historical fiction imprint while I was there. And then from there, I went to Disney Publishing, which is the publisher of Rick Riordan, which he is the author of The Lightning Thief, as well as Mo Willems. So I got an even more in-depth look at the picture book and children's market as well, besides all of the licensed publishing that Disney does. And currently, where I am at Paramount is that we're now looking to work with other publishers in creating all different types of works based on the intellectual property of the Paramount company. So that could be Star Trek, it could be Emily in Paris, anything that you've seen on Paramount Plus is pretty much fair game to develop into a piece of publishing. So going back to your question, which is, what is the way to the path? I've seen, a picture book just sent as poetry, which is only 2 or 3 pages long, and then a full caption of what the author thinks that should be. I've seen full manuscripts completely done with a complete vision in which that is what what we eventually went with, because it was so turnkey and perfect when we saw it. So I think it's really honing in on your vision and how much risk you want to take and how much time you want to invest in for submitting your writing piece.
Okay, thank you. Tejas, I don't know if how much you can answer for that question, but do you feel a book has to be a certain way to be traditionally published?
Yes, I do. Again, it's not just me saying that. I mean, this is, if you look online, all these websites about submitting to agents, publishers, I published 6 books, I have an MFA, I did all this stuff, can write reviews for my books, etc. I don't have an agent, never had one. But yeah, if you want to go the traditional route, assuming you can get there, it's pretty difficult. And it's not really sane or rational anyway, in my view. Yeah, it does have to be, you have to have 85,000 words or whatever it might be. It has to be in a certain genre. It can't be part romance, part mystery, part this, part that. It's going to be really difficult. I'm not saying it's impossible. Anything is possible. It's even, you've had stories of people who went to publishers directly and got published. It's not likely though. It's highly unlikely. Yeah, I would say if you want it to be traditionally published, and again, that's if that even happens, then yeah, you would have to have it in a very specific genre, especially again, it's all about marketability for them. So, if they can sell it, that's the main thing. It's not about the quality per se.
I'm just gonna step in there and say that part about being marketable is that your vision, your idea has to have a very strong point of view in what you're presenting, and it's eventually what the publisher, if you want to go that route, they're going to look at the work and go, we've never seen anything like this before, we have to do this book. Or if you're looking to get into some type of genre, then what you have is a publisher may take a chance on a first-time author, but after that, it's all depending on your, what we call an author track. So there's ways that they can track your sales, your social media presence. Do you have all of those things? And then if you do have all of those things, then they may look and say, yes, we're going to publish you. So sometimes, I think, would you say Andy Weir is a good example of a self-publish. He's the author of The Martian, right? And what he did was, he just published a chapter a month, or maybe it was even a week, which was The Martian. He just put it on his website, and it became this thing that people just had to read. And then eventually, Penguin Random House, or Random House at the time, they found it and they're like, we need this book. 50 Shades of Grey started as fan fiction for Twilight, that some editor was like, this is amazing, all right, I can't believe what this is, we need to take it and turn it into a book. But, they didn't, it was originally self-published, in which it was picked out and chosen, so, but these are 1 in a million.
It's not likely for a self-published book to be picked up. Andy Weir is obviously a famous writer who's traditionally published as well, right? I don't know.
Well, eventually he did, yeah. Eventually he did, yeah. But it started out as a website of him publishing a chapter by himself. I think he was an electrician or electrical engineer or something like that. And this is just what he wanted to do. But it was so compelling that.
Although that story I think is relatively unlikely though. If you look at Jane Friedman, her blog, and she said the same thing. If you have a self-published book, send it to a publisher, I wouldn't even bother. Unless it has like 1 million sales, or then they'll come, writing to you. It's better if you have something that's completely original, independent of anything you published already, and not in any series or whatever. That's what they tell you. So I don't know. I'm not saying it can't be done, but it's pretty unlikely. And I can tell you also, I try to get an agent for my book, Bad Americans. I'm told, it's too interesting. Like, that's what I usually get. This is interesting, but not right for my list. I can't sell it, so so this is this is what you will get if you write an interesting book. I'm sorry, but so I don't know. But I've been still having control, having the ability to do things my way. I've been able to do it. Bad Americans, for example, is published in 14 parts. Like, all the stories in the collection are published independently as well as within the book. I published them 1 month apart, 6 months apart, before the 2 books. So I was able to create this ambitious publishing plan just completely on my own. And working with my team, which I can talk about, I was able to achieve this vision. So, but yeah, I mean, obviously, if you are able to publish traditionally, you get the perks of that, but it's going to be a tough process as well. I mean, it could also happen in 2 seconds, but and I know people where it did, of course.
I've seen that, especially. I have while I was working at DC Comics, I had a friend who is an artist come into the office. He was showing off his portfolio of his latest thing, and he brought a friend for moral support who had a very small portfolio. And when the editors were done with my friend looking at his work, they looked at the person I had never met before. They looked at his portfolio. They're like, "Can we get more of you?" And they went up and down. It was shown throughout the building. Every editor wanted him to draw their comic, and he wasn't even intending to. He just brought a little nothing with him, and his style was like that much more exciting than the style that my friend was presenting, that he was just overshadowed, and it was all within that interaction of just showing it off. So I guess the part of that is that it can happen like that and not happen at all like that. So I guess always be prepared if you're going to be in a situation where you might have the ability to show something off.
And I find also these days, a lot of writers I know, they will try to publish traditionally, and then if they can't get there, they'll just self-publish. So it's like, people are, a lot of people are just doing a hybrid, like they'll self-publish some books. If they can get it traditionally published, fine. If not, it's whatever it takes. These are people who write multiple books. If you're only writing one book, it might be a different procedure also. So
I think there's a statistic out there, if you can get 1,000 people who are going to buy your book through self-publishing, that could be enough to spark an interest in from one of the major publishing houses, which is
really, that's it.
Yeah, that's it for them to take a look at you.
I have 45,000, so I don't know.
There's also David Sanderson, right? Who Brandon, yeah, who broke off from major publisher and just decided to self-publish, and now
I didn't realize you did that. Because I know most of the guy who's going to come here, he was his editor. The other guy, the other publisher, right? Go ahead.
Yeah, and he's now sold millions of copies doing it on his own.
All right, thank you. Let's see, that actually, my next question here is another good one, because I know we talk a lot with self-publishing also, and about mentioning a team. It'd be a good segue to go into how do you self-publish successfully, and what kind of team do you need?
So that's me, obviously. So yeah, I mean, I've developed it over time, but these days I have a copy editor, a proofreader, a marketer. I actually have 2 publicists, one for reviews and articles, one for events, and I have a cover designer, of course. So I think that's everyone. So yeah, it's quite a large team at this point that I built just to publish my own books. And plus, I've also now collaborating with this author collective of 15 writers. Many of them are also independent publishers, authors and publishers, and have their own little worlds that they follow that they developed. And so, we're working with them as well to kind of broaden our reach, both on social media and otherwise. Yeah, so these are people I work with. Literally, I'm fielding emails from each of them all the time, because we're going through this process of Bad American Part 1 just came out September. Now each story can be published once a month, and then the big book will come out in April. So, these are all people who work for me, and they're all doing different aspects of the, whether it's editing, whether it's cover design, whether it's marketing and publicity. These are people I found, I don't even think I've met any of them in person. It's all online. These are people, over time who I've hired and who I work with. And then also, as I was saying, I have beta readers, I have subject specialists. These are people who most of you are for free. The other people, for the most part, I pay them. But the beta readers, subject specialists, when I started writing Bad Americans, it was the heart of the pandemic. And I always wanted to write a book about, that was basically a frame story with short stories in it. That was my ambition from back when I was at Oxford and I was reading to the Cameron. And when I was gonna write my next book after my trilogy came out, and the last one coming out in 2020, the pandemic actually happened, and I got the virus, and my mom worked at Elms Hospital, and many people who died from it, so I was like, okay, this is what I have to write about. I was already wanted to write about it, but this is what I have to write about. And so I was like, well, how do I create a comprehensive portrait of what happened in this time? And so I created the characters, and all of them were different, but based on what their backgrounds, I was like, well, I really want to get it right, because I'm not the great realist, right? So I went to people who either I knew, or I found people who I barely knew in college who were in these professions. Like, for example, the book is set in the Hamptons, and I found somebody who I went to college with who I barely knew. Like, I met her one time, and I contacted her, and she was willing to show me around. And I went there several times with her showing me around and giving me the essence of it. Same thing with, there's a model in the book. Like, there was a girl I went to college with, she became a model. So I contacted her, and she was willing to help me too. She wrote the entire story and, critiqued it and stuff. So, so those are people who a lot of people have helped me, mainly because they know that I'm really authentically wanted to create this authentic portrait of the pandemic experience. And so that's part of my team too. It's not a paid part of my team. But again, you need all these kind of components if you really want to make a published work. And obviously, if you're paying them, that's not necessarily cheap. And this is something I've built over time. And I can also talk about the different ways to publish in terms of vendors and stuff. But yeah, it does take a lot if you really want to do it the right way. But again, there's no one way to do it either. You could also, by the way, put it on Amazon for free and do nothing. But I really wanted to do it, the best way possible, because I want to create a large body of work. I want to create this movement, this collective. So that was always my ambition, my vision. So that's just me, but there are many different ways to do it. But as I said, I do work with a lot of people who do a lot of different things for me. And obviously, if you have the traditional way, those people are doing all that stuff, and you don't have to hire them yourself and all that stuff. But you also don't have as much control, but you do have that luxury.
Okay, thank you. Just jumping into the next step, we've tackled both self-publishing and then, of course, talking to larger publishers. How would you approach a small press somewhere in the middle? When would it be better to self-publish or go with a small publisher, or make the risk and go to a bigger publisher? We could begin with Michael if you have any experience with that.
Yeah, so I would say I work for both small publishers and large publishers. Today, even the small publishers has at least one or two titles that are backlist, that just backlist forever. That basically pays for them to publish into whatever that they want to publish into, or it gives them the freedom to, while the larger publishers usually publish almost every single category that you can think of. You are dealing with different budgets and different capabilities. For the most part, everyone is, no matter if it's small or large, everybody is passionate about books and introducing new authors. That's really what the publishers strive to do, if they're small or large. Sometimes I've heard authors say, I want to go with a small publisher because I want the white glove treatment. It doesn't matter if you're starting out or not. A smaller publisher can dedicate the staff to you as an author, and they're maybe only dealing with one or two books, while a larger publisher, your same staff person who is assigned to you may be dealing with like $30. So you're one in a whole ranch of other people who they are working with. And of course, those bring different expertises and different opportunities, but for the most part, you're dealing with very smart and dedicated people who are looking to maximize your potential as an author.
Yeah, so, I mean, I guess it was probably unlikely you would have a choice, but I would say though that I haven't actually had this issue presented to me because there are all different types of small publishers. There are university presses. There are small presses that have been around for a long time, like Zank, for example. There are a lot of them now. Even some of the ones that have been around for a long time have contests. So they, you will pay $25 or $50 or whatever to make your manuscript. They'll have a contest, and based on what they select, they will publish that. Obviously, their reach is a little different. They don't have the reach of the big publishers. The likelihood of it being in a bookstore is less, I would say, but possible depending on the publisher. And also the contracts. You might have slightly favorable terms of the royalties. You probably wouldn't get an advance if it's that much. But again, even with the major publishers, that could happen as well. And again, with the major publishers, your book might be lost in a bunch of, in a whole sea of books that they're publishing. I've seen every single scenario among many writers I've known. So, obviously with the major publisher, most likely you'll get the publisher weekly review, all that stuff, relatively easily. But again, it could also only sell however many copies, whereas another author can get a lot more marketing support. I mean, I know a lot of major published, writers who still told me that they had to book all their events, they had to, do a lot of their own publicity, even though they're published by major publishers. So it really depends. Obviously for myself, I have to do pretty much everything, or through my team anyway. It's more work in terms of that. But in terms of small versus self-publishing, though, I do see a lot of a trend over where a lot of people are like, well, I'm not going to get enough from a small publisher, so I might as well just do it myself. And that is something that I myself came up, had to think about Bad American specifically, whether or not, because I felt I could have even better reach than most small publishers. Get more reviews and have more publicity than just by going through a small publisher. So, but again, it depends. I mean, if you're with Princeton University Press, they might do a lot more for you than say, some press that's only been around for a few years and no one's ever heard of. So.
Okay, thank you. So the next couple of questions are more geared towards the good news. You got published or self-published, and now we're up to the next step. Let's say something like The Martian, which 50 Shades that we mentioned just before, something that was self-published that actually got adapted to a movie or TV series. What happens next if there is film and foreign right acquisitions, and what experience do you have with that? You can begin with Michael.
Yeah, so I'm not, so that's usually something that you would work out with your editor if you are in that situation. Your editor's hopefully your biggest cheerleader through the process, because they're your representative to the publisher. So I've only seen these contracts before, so I know that depending on the publisher, they might be boilerplates. And basically it's just standard language. So you may have to do a lot of negotiation when it's turned into something, and how much rights you want in exchange for how much money you want to take. There's some that want total control with a huge upfront advance. There's others that are like, oh, thank goodness you're turning it into a movie, TV show, audiobook. I'm only going to take the standard because they're so thankful. So I think at that point, it's really what you want to work out with and what you think that the limits are on you and what you want to do with your material.
Well, let me start with this. I actually used to work for a literary agency. That was my first job out of college, and I worked there for 3 years. So I can tell you the ideal scenario of getting an agent. So let's say you get an agent. They shopped around the book. 6 editors love it. They're they're all what do you call it? Auction, whatever. There's an auction basically, and they're all saying,
if there's 6, then you could go to auction. But then there's sometimes some people will just take the deal under.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Again, any scenario exists just like in any other thing. But that's somewhat the ideal.
Right.
Like everyone loves you, like 8 editors love you, and you get the top choice, which is like the $600,000 advance or something like that. But anyway, and then they put you as a priority, and you're great, whatever. But in that case, the agent will will handle the contract stuff. Now, someone who doesn't have that and or is like relatively global, they'll have the ball to pick contract. There's only so much you can change, and this is like 20 years ago I'm talking about, but probably not much has changed in terms of that. Royalty percentages are pretty standard across the board. It's just the amount of advance you get, and so the higher you get, the better, because you don't have to pay that back for the most part. And then eventually you start getting the royalty once that earns out. But the film and the foreign rights are things that a good agent would keep for you, and so they would negotiate that. In some cases, the publishing house will take it, and then your editor will negotiate that. When I was working for an agent, for the most part, we handled that stuff, or we could subcontract it into a sub-agent, who's often even international. Let's say, for example, we represented Bill Bryson. His foreign rights were handled by someone in England, for example, and his film rights were handled by a sub-agency as well. So, but anyway, in terms of the sub-publishing, anything is possible, of course. Obviously, as a sub-publisher, you own all the rights. So either you would negotiate that, or you would, hire somebody to do that. So that's the way that would work in general.
Okay, thank you. So then our next question is, how important are audiobooks in today's market? We'll start with Tejas.
I would say they were pretty important. I haven't actually, none of my books are actually in audiobook except for the first book, The Brotherhood. Although that's virtual voice, which is kind of like semi-AI, just because I haven't had time. I do know one writer in my collective who did create an audiobook, and he actually did it through a publisher, a small publisher, but he didn't have to pay them anything. He did a royalty contract with them, and they eventually, he did actually earn some of it back, so he actually did pretty well. And they created it for him, etc. That's the ideal scenario, I would say. Usually it will cost you thousands of dollars for somebody to do it professionally for an audiobook. That said, a lot of people listen to audiobooks, which includes self-published books. So it is definitely on my agenda to create them. I just haven't had time for my books, but I would say, the audiobook market is pretty large, and people do listen to them, listen to them in the car or whatever when they're driving to work. So I would say, again, I don't know how it is from a traditional perspective, but I do know people who are self-published, in my collective, who've done pretty well with audiobooks.
Yeah, it's usually something standard that a publisher would be some of the rights that you'd be looking to give. And the publisher would then create the audiobook based on your work. So basically you're giving the rights to create an audiobook based on what you have written. Some smaller publishers have to contract out for audiobook producers. And the way that it's marketed, you're on BNN, you would be marketed with your print, your ebook, and your audio all on the same page in the same part of the metadata, and that's sort of where your sales would happen. So the retailers now make it the consumer's choice on how to consume an author's work. And there are some books that have no audio component, but audio is a large component of the now publishing ecosystem. I would recommend that if you have the capability to create an audiobook, or if you have the rights to do an audiobook, I would say try to do it.
Okay, thank you. So the next couple of questions we tackled about, getting acquisition and rights. It becomes a spin-off of something. You have an audiobook for it. Now it's, up to something like this, an author appearance. How can I get my book into a library collection, and how do I do an event? Give a reading. It's advantageous.
Yeah, so for libraries, usually they'll have a collection development policy, so you can look at that. Again, if you're a self-published writer, it's probably the best way to do it. Usually you have to send it to the collection development department. You can go into your local library and ask them, and it's possible they have a more liberal policy. For example, at Queens Public Library where I work, I used to be able to myself put stuff in the collection. We have an indie author festival that we do every year. We have an indie author collection, which is really rare in New York City. So this is stuff that we've developed, me and my co-manager. But now I can't do that anymore. We have to send it to the collection development department to do it. So things can change. And certainly with NYPL and BPL, they have book ops, so that is centralized. But for the local branch, you can either go to your local branch and see what their policy is. Usually they will have you send it to the collection development department. It does help if it's, especially if it's something that has local interest. My books are about Queens, so they obviously have tremendous local interest for that collection. But so there's that in terms of libraries, and doing events again. You can just go to that institution, whether it's a library, whether it's a bookstore. Bookstores, they might want you to have the book in their collection and or have the ability to sell it. I did do one, for example, just last week in Saratoga Springs, where I was at a conference, and they kind of bought my book and then sold them or resold them. So it is doable. I've done it at bookstores. I've done it at libraries. I've done it where the bookstore worked with the library and the bookstore got the book and then they did the sale in the library. So again, it's just about approaching people and getting and seeing what works, and in terms of doing events like this one or whatever it might be, just networking and putting yourself out there. Did I answer the whole question?
I think so.
And on the traditional side, this is why you would want to work with a traditional publisher, because they have an entire sales force that is trying to do this for your book. And the people that Tejas spoke about, I'm just going to use the Queens Public Library, the Brooklyn Public Library, the New York City Public Library. Brooklyn and Manhattan are together, and they combine under book ops, which you just mentioned. So the publisher would be talking directly. Well, in some cases, the largest publishers can talk directly to book ops, but normally they will go through a wholesaler. There's just recently been a collapse in the number of book wholesalers that work with libraries, but there is still some that are out there, and the publisher would talk to the library wholesaler, and then the library wholesaler sells the book to the library. So it is a little bit of a roundabout process, but if the publisher is doing their job, then it'll make it all the way through to make it to the collection development. And about author events, a publisher would also have your public relations person that is booking all your events for you, and that they would try to get you stops along the way. And the way that a traditional publisher would if a traditional publisher was doing this event, they would have the local bookstore set up a table to do the sale, because that local bookstore would be able to report those sales to what they call Nielsen or Circana BookScan, which tracks your sales, and also the local bookstore also reports those sales to the New York Times, so it would be counted for your totals for going to the New York Times bestsellers list. So, so doing an event at a library takes a lot of coordination in order to put yourself on the book sales map, so to speak. So it would get you even a local B&N now could create the event for you.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to this actually. So I one thing I forgot to mention is, I also, as I said, I have a team, so I have a publicist who also creates, books some of my events. But just generally speaking, self-published authors don't do as well in bookstore. It's pretty rare, in fact, to get your book to a bookstore. I have some, but for the most part, it's not easy. Most self-published authors sell books as ebooks. I would say 90-something%. So through Amazon and or the other vendors. I do use Kindle Unlimited sometimes for my ebooks. I do get, I think I have over 100,000 reads on there now, and still thousands of copies as ebooks. So for the print book, I mean, you could, as I said, libraries might be a little easier. Bookstore, with an assignment deal, I have done it, and I've also had bookstores just get it. The thing is that, for the paperback hardcover, like for the recent book, that's through Ingram directly, whereas the ebook directly through Amazon or other services like Draft to Digital, Smashwords, where you could aggregate it and send it out to different places. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can talk to me later and I can explain. But I'm just gonna kind of go into more of the nitty-gritty of how to actually do it. But in general, I mean, the bookstore is primarily the major publisher's haven, not the self-published, and to some, mostly not for the University of Small Princes either. That said, Barnes & Noble, and I haven't done any events at Barnes & Noble, but a lot of my members of my collective have done it, and they're independent self-published authors too, and they said they were actually pretty helpful in terms of having an event at the bookstore for their book. But yeah, I mean, this is a larger conversation of how to actually publish the book if you're doing it yourself. And you have a lot of different options, and there's no one way to do it. There's a lot of different ways depending on what's right for you. So I've done it the right way for me, and that can also change book to book, by the way, in terms of the marketability and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, but if you're just starting out, again, I can, and if you give me your information, if you're interested, I can send you an email with like a bunch of different links and stuff that you can read related to that. But yeah.
Okay, thank you. I just have an offshoot question of it in case the answers may be a little different. What about getting your book taught in a classroom or read by a book club? Is that process a little different?
Maybe you could take that first.
Yeah, sure. So being taught in the classroom, if you are friends with a teacher, then that would be one that you can influence the teacher directly, possibly. If you're looking for it to be part of the curriculum or supplemental material, that is a long, involved process that involves bids and being part of some types of collections, being vetted. It is a long, involved process for your book to be officially taught in the classroom, or even part of the classroom library that is within each classroom. At least in New York State, they've sort of gravitated toward that method where a kid can independently pick out a book at the back of the classroom. But even then, you still have to go through school wholesalers to get your book cataloged into those collections. I'm sorry, that was the school part. What was the other part? Oh, book club.
Book clubs, yeah.
Yeah, there are ways that a public relations person could reach out to these individual book clubs depending on the size and get your book nominated to be part of them. And of course, they're looking for the larger, the Reese Witherspoon Book Club, the what you see on the Today Show. GMA, yes. Yeah, all of those. If you're thinking those as a book club, but if it's just a individual group, it's really talk to your librarian, talk to some friends, and say, hey, do you want to bring this book into your book club?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I mean, like, Bad Americans, for example, doing a book club kind of talk on Saturday, for example, in Queens. So that was, this is a book that's pretty interesting, I think, for book clubs to talk about all these different perspectives of what happened during the pandemic. So that's the way I kind of approach a lot of these events that I have. And yeah, I'm not interested that way from the local book clubs, libraries, etc. Sorry, if you want something else?
Yeah, I just want to. Yeah. The one thing that I would recommend for either, whatever happens, is that you should have talking points for the discussion. So if you do get into a book club, at least that you would have the leader be able to guide the questions, and that you would be in control of those types of questions and how you would think one would want to discuss the book. Because if you can come there with a ready-made plan, it makes it a little bit more turnkey and not a lot of work on the book club organizer.
Yeah, and actually they call it a book club kit usually. That's kind of this fancy kind of PDF document usually. I actually have it in the back of my second part 2 of Bad Americans as well. But yeah, that's something that the publisher and or your publicist, in my case, could handle. But yeah, and that's getting into the book clubs at the library level. Yeah, just talk to your librarian, etc. The big ones, Reese Witherspoon, Oprah, whatever. I mean, good luck unless you're major published. It's possible. They usually have scouts. It's not like you could just get into it. Anything's possible. But in terms of the getting it taught, yeah, it's going to be not easy. That's something one of my publicists is trying to do for Bad Americans. I think it would be of interest, certainly in terms of historical fiction, and in terms of the way that it's done and how it's related to a lot of these medieval epics. But again, yeah, just trying, putting it out there. There is something called book rights, I believe, that part of the contract, something that you could theoretically sell. I remember that being there when I was working in publishing. So that's also something that when you negotiate with a publisher, your agent could keep for you in theory, and then you could then sell that book club rights. As I said, as a sub-publisher, you have everything. So that you can do that yourself or have somebody do it for you. I think I answered the question.
Yeah. I just have one more question, but I do want to add to the library collection. But your local library, I'm sure most of you here are from Great Neck, but if you're not from Great Neck, check with your local library if they have a collection for local authors. Great Neck here has our legacy collection. We are always expanding it for authors who either still live in Great Neck or maybe used to live in Great Neck, whether they were deceased or not. So that could be a great way to just talk to your librarian and see, hey, do you have a local collection I published? Here's my book, and they can consider that to their collection. So that's also a good way. You don't have to worry about if it's a genre specific or if they're looking for things like that. Just ask if they have a local collection for their own residents, past or present. That could be a great way to get your book in here too. So for our last question here, how do you get reviews for your book, and what awards could your book be eligible for? We can start with Michael.
Yeah, so the publicist at a traditional publisher would be submitting for all of these awards, and there are a lot of book awards. There are a lot of yeah, you know, it runs, it's a huge gambit of books that, that can be awarded, especially in the library world. You know, the Caldecott, and I'm thinking the one for the artist, of which I'm completely, you have the Dr. Seuss Award, there's so many other awards, and depending on the genre that you're writing in or who you are as an author, there is probably an award for you. If you are an Asian American, there's an award for those authors. I mean, everything, how you define yourself, there's probably an award that you can apply for. So your publicist will know your bio, your stats, and they would submit what is appropriate for you.
Any other question?
Yes, so how do you get reviews for your book and awards that they could be eligible for?
Right, so for reviews for self-published writers, there are, Publishers Weekly has the Book Life program. You could, you pay $25 and they consider whether to review it. There's also a more expensive option where they will review the book. You know, you don't know what kind of review it's going to be, but they will review it. And the Crocus also has a similar program. There's the big two. And then there's also Clarion, Forward, and there's Blue Ink, and Midwest is actually a pretty cheap option, only $50. But those are the kind of the major ones. You have to pay this fee, but they will send it to a professional reviewer and they will review it. Not guaranteed at all to be positive, but you'll get what you get. And to your publicist, to my publicist, they've been pretty active, however they do, getting me, Amazon reviews. I put it on NetGalley, have people download it, review it that way. And that's also done, by the way, by many other publishers and through Edelweiss and similar things. Now there's also something called Book Sirens, I think, and others as well. So those are ways in we can talk about the pre-publication campaign, which traditionally usually lasts about 6 months, if not longer. My publication plan for the latest book was about 6 months. And within that period, trying to create buzz through NetGalley, through these reviews, and through whatever my publicist does. I don't even know how they do it, but so yeah, we did a pretty good job for a self-published book. In terms of awards, there's some that still with the stigma, you're not going to be eligible for as self-published writers. National Book Award won't take it unless you're a self-publisher who publishes other people, which I might be, by the way, next year, but through my collective. But I wasn't eligible for that this year. However, I did submit to the Pulitzer Prize, so we'll see. It does now accept self-published books. And in terms of the ones you're talking about, most of those are children, so I'm not completely sure about that. But there are lots of awards out there, a lot of award contests. In terms of the independent ones, the more prestigious, Eric Hoffer is out there. There's Independent Publisher Awards. It's a pretty big name, but there are a lot of them. And in fact, for my last book before this one, The Dance Towards Death, which is the third book, A Garter Chronicle, I submitted it to a lot of awards, and I placed in 15 awards, either as a finalist, as an award winner of some sort, whether it was first, second place. And so, yeah, that was, at least to show that, its quality, it was effective in that way. A lot of the awards do have fees, including the Pulitzer, it's like $75 or something like that. So it's not going to be free even to submit it. That's true for the major publishers as well in most cases. But yeah, I for myself, someone who wants the prestige and want people to know how good my books are in terms of their quality, in terms of the vision. I definitely think that's an important component of my strategy. And that's what I'm doing with this book as well. But So yeah, and again, it depends on what you're writing, what your vision is, how you want your career to go, and everything else. But yeah, it's even for self-published writers, there are plenty of awards out there that you can submit your book for.
Thank you both. Thank you, Tejas and Michael. We're gonna open up to some Q&A. If you have multiple questions, we'll try to go one at a time. You don't have to read your question out loud if you would rather speak to any of them afterwards, that's fine too. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
Yeah, about the awards that you said that you have to submit the book for award. So let's say you have a book and it's really like out there in social media and everybody talk about it. Do you still have to submit it, or they said, oh, it's such a good book and we like it, or you still have to submit it?
Yes, well, if everybody's talking about it, even if it's New York Times bestseller, could sell 100,000 copies. If your publishing team does not submit it to the award, they're not looking at it.
Yeah, because there are a lot of books out there. So yeah, I mean, just go by the guidelines. You know, if you don't do that, yeah, no matter how great it is, even if they've heard of it or whatever, it's not gonna win.
So does it depend about sales, or if I just publish it, I
No.
can just right away submit it?
Yeah, I mean, every contest has its own whatever award has its own system. So I think for the Pulitzer, they were 3 people read it or something like that, like every single book. And then, they submit to the jury, which is like 9 people, and then they decide, or sometimes they don't even pick one. Most award contests, they will have a certain number of people who are reading it. Maybe the first, depending on how many things that they have, maybe the first one will be like some intern or something like that, going through it, and then they'll elevate that, they'll elevate it again, etc. That's usually how most contests work. And in some cases, it might be only a few people reading it. Some are more transparent than others in terms of the way they operate. But in most cases, they will, there will be a fee for it, and then that they'll use to run the contest to whatever expenses they have. And I don't know, usually in most cases, the readers don't get paid, but that might be true too. But yeah, I mean, there are a lot of them out there, and you can see if you go to my website, you can see the one that I won. Yeah, and I can also give you a list if you want.
Are there any other questions? Yes.
What is your budget, your annual budget for running your self-publishing operation?
It depends. So my like, for example, I think for this one, for each big book, I have a budget of about $15,000, which, I don't even know if I'm gonna reach that, but that's like my marker of how much I'm willing to spend to do all that stuff, the marketing and all that stuff, and to spend on my team. I also do Amazon ads, I do Facebook ads. That's all part of it as well. So I think depending on the book, I've spent more or less. I'd say in most cases I spent less than $15,000. For this one, since there are 2 books in one, I kind of gave myself $30,000, so $115 for each. Again, I don't know if I'm going to reach that amount even, but that's everything. All the members of my team I'm paying, all the publicity I'm doing on ads and everything else. So yeah, that's about for me, but it could differ. I would say, a lot of people who are major published, they will take their advance and they'll just spend it all on marketing. But this is the first time I've actually seen this, where someone actually advertised that they're going on a $30,000 publicity campaign. Like, it's like on their Amazon page. They're like, oh, by the way, I'm going on this, I'm going on all these talk shows, whatever, and this is how much I'm going to spend on it. So, yeah, I mean, you can spend your own money, you can raise money. There are people who've done Kickstarters, GoFundMe for this. I did GoFundMe for the second edition of the Brotherhood, which I published in 2018. I think I did get some money for it. But yeah, for myself, that's usually how much I spend.
Any other questions?
So, in terms of publishing, going to the query letter, are you guys able to go into more detail than that? Cause I know it's like similar to like, you know, in screenwriting, they do log lines, pitch decks, well, not a whole pitch deck to them. But what is an agent looking for in a worthwhile query letter?
Okay, so I can take that, I guess, you can also take that after me. So usually it starts with like the pitch basically, and then it goes into the body. Usually if you have like a one line tagline of what the story is, what the hook is, you have the one line hook, and then you can go into the brief synopsis of the book, and then the last thing is your background, you know, with your credentials. So that's the typical 3-paragraph structure. Usually they will either A, reject you, B, not respond, C, ask for first 50 pages, which is called a partial, and or the first 2 chapters, or it's D, ask for the full manuscript right away. You know, in the ideal scenario, you would send it to say 50 agents, and like, you know, 10 of them are interested, and then, you know, suddenly you're waiting, and then one person says, oh, by the way, I'm interested in signing you, you know, and then you'll talk to them, but, well, the first thing you'll do is you'll contact every other agent and say, oh, by the way, someone wants to sign me, and then either everyone's not interested or everyone's interested, and then suddenly there's like a war with that, and then you decide, you can meet with all of them, whatever, and you decide which one is the best for you or whatever. It's like dating or whatever it might be. So that's the ideal situation, you know, let's say. And then, you know, once you have the agent, after they submit the book, and I told you the ideal situation in terms of getting the publisher. But that's usually the most effective way. I mean, you know, I've seen like query letters that were extremely long, you know, especially if the person has a long history, and they're just kind of spelling out everything that they've ever done kind of thing and their background, but usually shorter is better, you know, and so you want to hook them right away with the one-line pitch, and then kind of have a small synopsis, you know, drawing them in, a little thing about you, and then say, oh, do you want to see it?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, but I would say that when you write about yourself, that you include your whole self, because you don't know who, you know, if you're sending to this agent, they may only be looking for female authors. So just if you can't tell by your name, you may want to include that. You may want to include your ethnicity. You may want to include religious background, because there's all sorts of publishers that are out there, and there is going to be somebody looking for exactly you to write this book. So.
I would also say, like, if you know that person somehow and or have a referral,
Right.
you put that first. So like, you know, like for example, one agent I got through a friend of mine who's a very well-regarded literary writer, and so I wrote that first, like, that first person recommended to you, and you know, they did respond. So doesn't mean you're gonna get an agent that way, but you know, that is something you would do in that case.
Yes, absolutely. Connections is everything in the publishing business. It's a very small world. Yeah, many people all know each other. Names count. So don't be afraid to drop it if you know somebody.
Thank you. Any other questions? Good? Okay. All right. Okay, yes, so feel free to come up and speak with them as well with any other questions you may have privately, but thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you for coming, everyone.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
Oh, wow.
Give me 1 second, I'm just gonna shut this off.